This is me. Is that you? I guess things started for me in a different direction after my late wife Gaynor and I had purchased a townhouse condo, and at the age of 33, I was in my living room with a large window behind heavy curtains. I seen bright light shining through, descending downward to our small yard outside. I got up from the couch and proceeded out the door to my front yard. I looked upward to this giant form shrouded in white light, and an arm came from the light, still being light itself, and pointed at me and said, "You are chosen." Then the arm pointed upward, and as I looked up, I seen a large passenger plane flying along. Suddenly, great balls of fire started hurling down to the earth. As they struck the earth, I walked outwards with absolutely no fear and at peace. I could never explain because I had never felt it before. Then suddenly, I found myself on a great highway, sloped downward, out of view, and all these people came upwards, filling the enormous highway from edge to edge, and they grabbed me, and they started to tear me to pieces, and until I became more than I could ever perceive in understanding, and then I woke on the couch. Later in the years, in a waking dream, I heard our Creator's voice speak to me simple words: "I am pleased with you." Needless to say, it was very powerful and moving, and for a brief instant I remember thinking why God would not be proud of me, and as I was asking, the answer was being given at the same time. Pride is not of God. So for the following years, I taught my children and grandchildren I only want to be pleased for them, and they will never be inflicted on my pride and ego for them, only that I love them regardless and am always pleased with them. After that, signs started appearing, and dreams started happening. I am not a prophet. I have no idea what the future holds, but the patterns show great difficulties ahead. Those dreams were given to me. I did not perceive them myself. They did not come from me. They are not normal dreams, as dreams are. They stand out clearly different. I'm finally sharing something outwardly because as much as I believe that I am delusional and in no way deserve this, because there are far better people in spirituality than I am a paradox because I believe and disbelieve at the same time. Except that has been changing recently. And yet, always following the path I hope will please our Father and Creator, our living God. I had a very early history of my connection with nature. My mother was terrified to empty my pockets for washing clothes after so many creepy crawly friends I would bring home hiding in my pockets. I wasn't afraid of anything. I was fascinated and in love with all insects and animals. Not a typical 3-year-old, I decided to follow a lady onto a Toronto bus early in the mornings from the east side to take a ride around the city until late in the evening, when I was finally found in the parking of the bus, only to finally show up wearing a policeman's hat and being carried to my mother, sobbing and crying. She finally got her baby back. I came close to death many times, some because of my own adrenaline rush for going to the edge of things, where something must have intervened because I should have been maimed or dead on a few occasions. At a young age, I was overly sensitive, with empathy, and on several occasions growing up in that town that became a city called Fort McMurray, people know of from where the oil in Canada comes from. I seen a person being beat up by multiple people, and I could not just watch. So before I learned to defend myself, on several occasions, I got beat up by multiple people because I could not let the person suffer unfairly. Their pain was my pain, and each time I left alone defending myself, and every time it was well worth it. On my 9th year, my parents separated, And at some point in grade 6, I had met 2 new friends. We hung out at school, and having no real supervision, I was freer than most children, had already experienced cigarettes and cannabis. I was lured to a person that they knew for the fact that I loved cannabis, and even at that age, that was not there. And we had agreed to sleep over and tell our parents, as the old stories generally go, that we're at each other's house, so no parent ever knew. I was lured to this person. They knew that I loved cannabis. Instead, a weird sexual event began, and at some point I was drugged. A strange man used my body, and the only grace I was given was I did not have to live it fully, except for one moment where, when I woke up with my underwear around my ankles, just a small child, and being embarrassed, thinking I had done it somehow, and this man asking me to do things to his body, and then waking again in the morning. I was told never to speak of it or I would be killed. It was a strange thing, not understanding sexuality at that age even. I was scared that somehow it made me some homosexual. And even though this was done to me by an animal, I do not carry hate or malice towards any gay beliefs, only to the animal that continued on after me and before me. I have only felt attractions towards females, and never any man, so I know what my body desires, just like gay people are physically attracted to the same sex. I met my wife in Fort McMurray, and she had 2 children, pregnant with one of them. When I was 15 years old, following a friend to his cousin's to see if we could find any cannabis, I stood there at the door looking into a kitchen and seeing my future wife, with my son Daniel, standing and leaning on the inside of a baby playpen, and Gaynor standing there pregnant with my future daughter, Nicola, yet to be born. I did not know until almost 2 years later I was looking at my future family, a glimpse for the future yet to come. She was from England, Manchester, Earlham, Cadishead, and she was my little English queen, and we made a life and a family together. Life led me on a path that eventually led me back to her and Danny turning 2, and Nikki was turning 1, and Samantha showing up a couple of years later to complete our family. I was 19 with a family of 3 children, while my friends were still experiencing single life. It was difficult, but the happiness that came through the trials and tribulations made it well worth it. They gave me 10 grandchildren to be blessed, with 3 of them on my 36th birthday. Around that time, I was in the papers for running into a burning building, and trying to put it out, and going back to make sure that the kids were not unconscious, they were at school, and to help an old 90-year-old Vietnamese, very sweet old lady who lived with her son and 2 granddaughters. The newspapers got a picture of me carrying her while she was still sitting on a chair. I was carrying her further away from the fire because it was terribly hard to see how it affected her. She was alone, the kids were in school, and her son was at work. Why am I finally revealing and sharing this information? Is because I am starting to believe. I wish to have a record of history, even though this video will probably go nowhere. If any of it comes true, perhaps I will be vindicated as not delusional. All my life, I have been sacrificing everything for this, some would say, crazy belief that was for nothing. It is difficult being able to sometimes see into the soul of a person and see the contempt under the mask, and have your heart saddened for 1,000 times. I never ask anything of anyone, and I have given everything to exist in poverty because the debt-corrupted tool of usury can never be my master. I still know happiness and where it truly comes from, and I have learned, and I believe, I am not the body. I have a body. When I was very young, I had friends, Some I'm still connected with. And I had a decent IQ, which made me an extremely curious young man. And I spent many hours delving into dark magic, seances, Ouija boards, tarots. I even got a hold of a necromancer and satanic Bible. I believed I was invulnerable and very egotistical for a child, and started delving into it. I meditated long, long hours and had experiences I have yet to find others have had when looking. For example, one deep meditation session, I went so deep that I felt as thin as a two-dimension, and as best as I can describe, stretching out to infinity. I used to fight through a mental blockage, trying to perceive an existence before everything. I had to fight to hold that thought, like it wasn't allowed. It was a very strange feeling when I tried. It was like I could have the thought of truth, but for a brief instant, and then it was gone. And over, but I could never hold that thought. And I know this will sound even crazier than what I've shared, but it isn't a movie. It is true, and it is my life. The possession. This all happened, the events I will share, in the same house, within the basement, in this undeveloped part of the basement. It came from a door into a hallway, to an unfinished bathroom and 2 bedrooms. My sister and I's, and stairs in between the basement and bedrooms going up to the front door, with more stairs up to the top floor. In this basement, 2 times I was electrocuted. Once the light bulb exploded in my face, and once I almost hung myself weirdly accidentally, and was electrocuted on the balcony. Christmas lights sending me flying through the air, and thankfully lots of snow cushioned the fall, which was so fun I contemplated doing it again, and I did, but without the shock. I started dreaming of this evil, this presence, this of utter pure evil. It would come from the basement. This entity with human form, but shadow. And the same place I experimented all those bad, foolish, evil witchcraft things, because I believed I was strong enough, but was very naive. The first dream, I seen the shadow, this evil presence coming from the basement. I ran to the door of my next door neighbor's, Mr. Smith. I was banging on this door, utter terror and emotion, tears streaming down my face. He opened the door, and I started to try to warn him, and at some point this entity showed up behind, at the bottom of the stairs, pointed his finger at Mr. Smith, and I woke. A few days later, and within a short time span, very bad news. Mr. Smith's father had passed away. The next dream, I found myself at the front door inside, looking down the stairs to where the basement is located, and seeing the entity coming out of the basement and up the stairs, reaching out to grab me. I ran upstairs to the spare room next to my dad's, and seen my sister, who was in Edmonton at the time, with my mother and her husband Frank. She was sitting on the bed. I ran to her arms, terrified, trying to tell her and explain, and there was this Raggedy Ann doll hanging half over the back of the bed, between the wall. And as I was hugging her, it turned into the shadow, and it started reaching out for me. I remember trying to push the bed to hold its legs that were pinned between the wall, and I woke up. The third dream, I fell asleep upstairs on the couch instead of my bedroom right next to the basement. I was standing on the stairs, and this evil entity started its way up the stairs, trying to grab me. I grabbed my dad at the upper stairs and started to explain, but I knew it was too late. So the only thing I could think of was to turn on the light. As I knew it hated light, I knew it instinctively, and I woke up. I have never sleptwalked in my life before and after, to this day. I woke up lying on the floor of the basement this entity was coming from, and slowly came to the realization as I seen the light peering from under the door to the hallway outside. I ran with every ounce of my being up the stairs with utter terror ripping at my heart. A short time later, my dad's dad, my grandfather, passed away. Then I started having these occurrences I've, I guess, described as haunting. I started doing very poorly at school. My sleep was affected severely and I was exhausted as a child all the time. Then the incidents, as I drifted into slumber, the area just before dreams, it was like somebody was sticking a pin into a balloon. Bang! Next to my ear. Over and over. Bang! Just as I would almost sleep. Or footsteps constantly on the other side of the wall of my bedroom going up and down the stairs, or other things I know I am forgetting. Then the possession started. I could never harm anything in my life. When I accidentally killed, like an insect, I immediately felt great remorse, as I still do today. I very much try, with almost every meal of flesh I eat, to hold remorse and gratitude for the life of that animal that it came from. Every living thing is precious to me, and I always will love our living God and Creator, and will always wish to please Him. The Christ consciousness that we are all connected to, and makes us divine and forgotten and hidden purposely. Then the possession occurred. This entity found its way within a very vulnerable child, and I was taken, and I did not perceive. I just followed like I was looking out another's eyes that controlled my body, and it was me at the same time. Slowly, I started torturing my black cat that I loved dearly, and I could feel the pleasure it drove me like an animal. Each day, over and over, I would go further. Elastic bands around its paws, around its neck, so I could punch, suffocate, and choke her with my own hands. I do not know how long it went on. Was it days or weeks? But the time came where I found Smokey, and this impulse and desire to feel this while causing such atrocities was not within my being. Yet, here I was, slowly punching and beating and strangling and suffocating in the most horrific means with pleasure. The last time, as I pulled the blanket away, the horror filled me. It was like coming to from a nightmare. It was real, and I'd done it. I was fully aware of it, and all of what I had done, but instead of pleasure, shock, and horror, and reality. Smokey had blood all over her, and coming from her mouth, and was not breathing. I don't know how long I stared before I broke. It felt like many minutes. It could have been just mere seconds, as my mind was free to see the horror of what I had done with my own self. I still don't know why that moment awoke me. Perhaps it was the death of seeing something I loved, with realization what this pleasure within my soul had taken to me was so revolting. I cried, I howled, and somehow I crawled up the stairs with my back against the front door, crying as a child, unbelieving for what I had seen and what I had done. I cried out to God like I'd never done before. I cried out like I'd never done before. I cried, I howled, and whatever presence was no longer within me, I'm sure languished with great reverence and pleasure at my sufferings. It was somewhere in that time period that I knew God existed with no more doubt, not maybe, but I knew. Smokey, she walked casually around the corner in the basement from my bedroom, the lifeless body on my bed. She walked up the stairs, and she laid in my arms, and I cried, and I knew something other people did not. I had tortured her endlessly for days, like a nightmare, and instead of revolting with fear from me, she came to me, and she comforted me from all the atrocities, like she knew it was never me. It was a strong lesson for a child that many probably never have to learn. She ended up being pregnant during this sickening experience. And when her babies were born, all but one survived, which coincidentally was the exact same black color of her mother. And I always wondered that I had been possessed, and this entity would go on to torture me with fear. I could never explain because I knew what was in the shadows that really existed. And many years of my life I was severely terrified of the dark, sometimes irrationally, because I could feel its hateful presence just waiting. It wasn't until after the dreams, in my 30s, that I had lost the fear for dark. I had learned enough about love and truly how powerful it is. In my 30s, in my mind's eye, with my eyes closed, lying on my bed with the lights out in the middle of pitch dark, I finally looked at my entity. I seen it for what it truly was. I looked at its hideous and disfigured of ugly and pure hate floating just beyond my closed eyelids. With my mind's eye, and with every ounce of love that emanated from the lives of my grandchildren that gave me a strength I never had before, I pulled it close to me. With arms of love and forgiveness, I held it to my breast. I held it like I would a dear loved one, pouring my love into this entity. It left me that day, changed, and never to return again. And I never had fear again of sitting in the dark alone. After that day, I have always sit with peace of heart and mind, even in the darkest of darkest nights, even in the middle of the wilderness. I was left with no fear. In my 30s, I discovered the whispers. They are sometimes the thoughts that are not you, but something else, whispering something you may find atrocious and out of place for who you are. It does not take long for the whispers to become your thoughts. When I first started, I could tell the voices to literally piss off. And over the years, those thoughts that were not mine became a whisper. I barely hear these days, and way much less often. You are manipulated by these whispers constantly, in lesser and greater degree depending on the individual. And with practice, you can hear your own voice again. And when you awaken to this, the whisperers become whisperers again, not able to manipulate you or your thoughts in the same way ever again. There is much more, but I think the important share is here. I have never shared except close friends, and later in years to my family and a small handful of people. And now you know me and my heart. Hopefully, when the world taints it, the truth will not be buried so long as last time. 2,000 years ago, when Christ tried to awaken and free the people from the constraints of this realm we exist within, in these temples that you hold. Think of it this way. You ride a great beast. Let's say it's a stallion. And it has its own wants and its own desires and its own drives. And we have been tricked into believing you are this body. You are not the body. You have a body. This is me. Is that you? I will end with this. I was born in 1969, and the year that I was born, my mother being pregnant with me, at about the 6th month in, her mother, my grandmother, passed away. And my mother wept and sobbed, and she suffered the loss of her mother. And I was born into this suffering. I think that might have maybe why I'm more empathetic. I don't know. But I do know something as precious as your own mother passing, and you being a baby within and feeling that suffering from your mother. I have no doubt that I did suffer with my mother as well. Bless you all, and all those your heart touches.